A single father cared for his sick son until the doctor revealed a shocking secret about his past. Amid the treatment, a romance blossomed that changed their lives forever. A story of hope and true love that will touch your heart. Subscribe, like, and comment on where you're watching from. The early hours of Tuesday morning were especially cold in New York City when Michael Johnson felt the feverish forehead of his son Ethan against his chest. The digital thermometer read 103 degrees, and the small hands of the 7-year-old boy trembled as he murmured incomprehensible words in his feverish state. Michael, a 35-year-old architect known for his meticulous precision in every project he undertook, felt for the first time in years a sense of complete loss of control. "Dad, I'm cold," whispered Ethan, his brown hair sticking to his sweaty forehead, the dark eyes he inherited from his father half closed from the fever. Michael wrapped his son in a wool blanket that his grandmother had knitted years before and rushed to the elevator of their building on Fifth Avenue. The night doorman, Mr. Thompson, a 60-year-old man who had known Ethan since he was a baby, immediately stood up from his chair when he saw the look of despair on the architect's face. "Mr. Johnson, what happened to the little one?" he asked with genuine concern, having followed every step of that child's growth. "High fever, Mr. Thompson. I need to take him to the hospital now," Michael replied, his normally calm and controlled voice now laden with anxiety. The journey to Mount Sinai Hospital felt like an eternity. Ethan was delirious in the back seat, securely strapped in his car seat, talking about dinosaurs and sandcastles, his favorite topics when he was well. Michael drove down Fifth Avenue, practically empty, with only a few night buses and taxis transporting the last workers of the night shift. The smell of the morning air mixed with the aroma of coffee beginning to brew in 24-hour diners created a strange contrast to his urgency. In the pediatric emergency room, Michael practically ran through the hallways that smelled of disinfectant and had walls decorated with colorful children's drawings, trying to ease the hospital atmosphere. The on-duty nurse, a middle-aged woman with a maternal smile, immediately directed them to a triage room. "What is the child's full name?" she asked, preparing an identification bracelet. "Ethan Johnson, 7 years old," Michael replied automatically while stroking his son's hair, which now seemed a bit more alert. It was then that she appeared. Dr. Emily Carter was exactly 41 years old, although her elegant posture and determined gaze made her appear younger. Her brown hair was neatly tied up in a bun, even after hours of night duty, and her green eyes carried the experience of someone who had saved hundreds of children's lives over 15 years of career. She wore a spotless white coat over a navy blue blouse, and a colorful pediatric stethoscope hung around. Her neck, details that Michael immediately noticed with his trained architect's eye for proposals and details. "Good morning. I am Dr. Emily. Let's see what is happening with this little patient," she said, in a sweet yet professional voice, bending down to Ethan's level. "Hi there, sweetie. What is your name?" "Ethan," the boy replied hoarsely, managing to give a small smile to the doctor. "Ethan is a very strong name. Did you know that Ethan is the name of a very brave character?" Dr. Emily asked, starting to examine the boy with gentle yet precise movements. Michael watched every gesture of the doctor, noticing how she managed to calm Ethan just with her presence. There was something in her way of dealing with children that was different from all the other doctors they had consulted over the years. She didn't just examine Ethan, she genuinely connected with him. "How long has he had this fever?" Dr. Emily asked, placing the thermometer in Ethan's ear. "It started yesterday afternoon after lunch. I thought it was something he ate, but it got much worse during the night," Michael explained, his large, calloused hands from creative work intertwined with nervousness. "Does he have any pre-existing medical conditions? Allergies? Has he ever had febrile seizures?" Dr. Emily continued her assessment, but Michael noticed that she was observing Ethan in a strange way, as if searching for something specific. "No, he has always been a very healthy child. Rarely gets sick," Michael replied, beginning to feel slightly uncomfortable with the intensity of the doctor's gaze. Dr. Emily asked to examine Ethan's body more closely, looking for signs of infection or rashes. It was when she gently lifted the boy's shirt that her expression changed drastically. There was a small scar on Ethan's right shoulder, about 2 centimeters long, in a slightly irregular shape, as if it had been made by a sharp object years ago. Dr. Emily's hands began to tremble imperceptibly. She disguised the tremor by pretending to adjust the stethoscope, but Michael, with his keen eye for detail, noticed the subtle change in her behavior. "How did this scar happen?" Dr. Emily asked, trying to maintain a professional tone, but Ethan sensed an urgency she couldn't completely hide. Michael hesitated for a moment, a reflex that Dr. Emily immediately picked up on. It was a household accident when he was very little. "Why do you ask?" Michael replied, his own voice now laden with a defensiveness he couldn't explain. "I need to see Ethan's documents. ID, birth certificate, vaccination card," Dr. Emily said with an urgency that made Michael furrow his brow. "Why? Does this have to do with his fever?" Michael questioned, instinctively pulling Ethan closer to him. "It's standard procedure for cases of high fever in children," Dr. Emily replied quickly, but her eyes couldn't seem to look away from the scar on Ethan's shoulder. Michael retrieved the documents. From an organized folder in his brown leather document holder, a keepsake from his father, Dr. Emily Carter examined each paper with an attention that went far beyond what was necessary for a simple case of fever. Her green eyes scanned every piece of information, every date, every signature, as if searching for inconsistencies that only she knew about. "Ethan was born here in New York City?" she asked, still flipping through the documents. "Yes, at Mount Sinai Hospital," replied Michael Johnson, now visibly uncomfortable with the direction the consultation was taking. "Doctor, is this really necessary? My son has a high fever and you're asking about documents?" Emily realized she had gotten carried away by the discovery and quickly regained her professional demeanor. "You're right. I apologize. Let's focus on what really matters now," she said, putting the documents away and resuming Ethan's physical examination. The next 20 minutes were dedicated to a thorough checkup. Emily ordered blood and urine tests, explaining that the fever could indicate a bacterial infection that would require antibiotics. Ethan was brave during the blood draw, gripping his father's hand tightly and trying not to cry. "You were very brave, Ethan. You deserve a special sticker," said Emily, placing a superhero sticker on the boy's arm. While waiting for the test results in the observation room, Michael couldn't shake the strange way the doctor had reacted upon seeing Ethan's scar. Something had changed in that moment, and he couldn't quite identify what it was. Emily returned an hour later with the results, but Michael noticed that she seemed different. There was a tension in her face that hadn't been there before, as if she had discovered something disturbing during her absence. "The tests showed a bacterial infection. I'm going to prescribe an antibiotic and an antipyretic. Ethan needs to rest for the next 3 days, she explained, filling out the prescription with impeccable medical handwriting. "Can I take him home then?" Michael asked, already preparing to dress Ethan. "Yes, but I would like to schedule a follow-up for next week, to monitor his progress," Emily said, her eyes meeting Michael's for the first time since the examination. There was something in that look that Michael couldn't decipher. It wasn't just professional medical concern, it was something more personal, deeper, as if she had seen something in Ethan that awakened memories or feelings she hadn't expected to encounter that March morning at the hospital. "Of course, let's schedule it," Michael agreed, still intrigued by the doctor's behavior. When they finally left the hospital, with Ethan already more cheerful due to the medication, Michael looked back and saw Emily watching them through the window. That image would stay etched in his memory for a long time, unaware that this encounter would completely change their lives. The rising sun of New York City painted the sky in shades of pink as father and son headed home, unaware that they had just embarked on a journey that would unveil secrets buried for years and forever change their definitions of family, love, and truth. A week later, Michael parked his silver Civic in front of Mount Sinai Hospital with a punctuality that reflected his meticulous nature. Ethan was fully recovered, running around the parking lot and watching the birds nesting in the trees surrounding the hospital. The boy wore his favorite shirt from the New York Giants, the team he had fervently supported since he was 3, and a pair of jeans that were already getting small due to his rapid growth typical of his age. "Dad, why do we have to come back if I'm already better?" Ethan asked, swinging his legs in the pediatric waiting room chair. "It's just for the doctor to see if you're really cured, son." "It's normal," Michael replied, absently flipping through an architecture magazine he found on the coffee table. But the truth was that Michael also didn't fully understand why Emily had insisted so much on the follow-up. Generally, pediatricians were satisfied with a phone call from parents confirming the child's improvement. Something about that previous consultation had remained unresolved, and he felt a strange curiosity to see the doctor who had taken such good care of Ethan. Emily appeared at the waiting room door promptly at 2:30 p.m., wearing a perfectly pressed white coat over an aqua blouse that accentuated her eyes. Her hair was down today, falling in soft waves to her shoulders, and Michael noticed that she seemed to have slept better than the previous week. "Ethan, how is my brave little patient?" she asked with a genuine smile that made the boy run towards her. "Dr. Emily, look, I'm strong," said Ethan, flexing his skinny arms comically, eliciting laughter from both the doctor and his father. "I see you're doing great. Shall we go?" "To the office, so I can be sure," suggested Emily, but Michael noticed that she was watching him with an intensity that went beyond routine medical concern. In the office, decorated with children's drawings and a colorful mobile that Ethan immediately began to spin with fascination, Emily conducted a complete physical examination, but much more thorough than would be necessary for a simple post-infection follow-up. "Ethan, do you remember when you were really little? Like when you were 2 or 3 years old?" Emily asked casually while listening to the boy's heart. Ethan made a thoughtful grimace that Michael recognized. Well, it was the same expression he made when trying to remember where he had put his toys. "I remember a little. I lived in a house with a yard, right, Dad? And I had a dog. Or was it someone else's?" Ethan said, looking at Michael for confirmation. Michael felt a knot forming in his stomach. They had never lived in a house with a yard. They had always lived in their apartment in Midtown. And they had never had a dog due to Michael's allergies. "No, son. You've always lived in our apartment, remember? And we never had a dog," Michael corrected. But he noticed that Emily, I was closely observing the interaction between them. "Oh, I see. I got confused," said Ethan, with the typical nonchalance of children. But Emily made some notes in her chart that seemed more extensive than necessary. "Mr. Michael, can I speak with you privately for a moment?" "Ethan can keep playing with the toys over there," suggested Emily, pointing to a corner of the office with colorful building blocks. "Sure," agreed Michael, although a sense of discomfort began to grow in his chest. Emily led him to a small room, adjacent to the office, closing the door behind them. The environment was austere, with only a table, 2 chairs, and various medical certificates on the walls. "Mr. Michael, I need to ask some questions about Ethan's medical history that may seem a bit invasive, but it's important for his follow-up," said Emily, her hands clasped tightly on the table. "What kind of questions?" Michael asked, his paternal instincts immediately on alert. Has Ethan had any significant physical trauma in his early years? Any accidents that resulted in hospitalization? Emily inquired, her green eyes fixed on Michael's brown ones. No, never. He has always been a very careful child. The only accident was the one that caused the scar on his shoulder, but it was superficial, Michael replied, but Emily noticed an almost imperceptible hesitation in his voice. Can you tell me in detail how that accident happened? She insisted, leaning slightly forward. Michael ran his hand through his dark hair, a nervous tic that Ethan had inherited from him. He seemed to be carefully choosing his words. He was about 2 years old. Playing in the kitchen while I was preparing lunch, he knocked over a glass jar that broke, and one of the shards cut his shoulder. It wasn't serious, but he needed a few stitches, Michael explained, but his description sounded too rehearsed to Emily. Which hospital did you go to? There should be medical records of that treatment, Emily asked, making more notes. It was at the urgent care in the area. Emergency treatment. They probably didn't keep records of something so simple. Michael answered quickly, but Emily noticed beads of sweat forming on his forehead. Mr. Michael, may I ask about Ethan's mother? Is she present in his life? The question dropped like a bomb in the silence of the small room. Michael abruptly stood up from his chair, his defensive posture evident. That has no medical relevance, Doctor. Ethan is my son. I have full custody of him, and that's all that matters, Michael said with a firmness that made Emily realize she had touched on an extremely sensitive point. Mr. Michael, please understand that I'm not questioning your parental rights. It's just that sometimes details about the family history can help in the child's medical follow-up. Emily tried to ease the tension, but she sensed she had lost his trust. Doctor, with all due respect, Ethan is healthy and has recovered from the infection. If there's nothing else related to his health, I think our consultation is over, Michael said, heading for the door. Emily quickly stood up, knowing she was losing an important opportunity. Mr. Michael, I'm sorry if I was too invasive. It's just that there's something about Ethan that seems familiar to me, and as a doctor, I feel I need to understand the situation better, she admitted, her voice laden with a vulnerability that made Michael stop at the door. Familiar how? Michael asked, slowly turning to face her. The scar? The shape of it? The location? I've seen something very similar before, Emily said, her words carrying a mystery she herself couldn't fully explain. Michael watched her for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether he could or should trust her. Doctor, Ethan is my life. He is all I have in this world. I will not allow anyone to question our family or cause any instability in his life, Michael said with a firmness that revealed both paternal love and a steely determination. I completely understand, and I admire your dedication as a father. But what if there is something about Ethan's origin that could affect his health in the future? Something you might not know, Emily ventured, aware that she was treading on dangerous ground. What do you mean? Michael asked, his voice now tinged with genuine concern. Family medical history, genetic predispositions, information that could be important for his preventive care, Emily explained, choosing her words carefully. Michael remained silent for a long moment, clearly battling an internal struggle between his need to protect the secrets he held and his concern for Ethan's well-being. Dr. Emily, Ethan is my son in every sense that matters. I have raised him alone since he was a baby. I know every reaction of his body, every preference, every fear. If there were anything important about his health, I would know, Michael finally said. But what if there were something you couldn't know? Something from the past that was omitted? Emily pressed gently. The question hit Michael like a punch. His expression closed off completely, and Emily knew immediately that she had struck a nerve. Our conversation ends here, Doctor, Michael said coldly, opening the door and returning to the office where Ethan was happily playing with the building blocks. Ethan, let's go home, son, Michael said, extending his hand to the boy. Is it over, Dad? But I was building a castle, protested Ethan, showing a wobbly tower of colourful blocks. Very nice, dear, but we can build castles at home too, Michael said, helping Ethan put away the toys. Emily watched them prepare to leave, feeling immense frustration. There was something about this family that intrigued her deeply, something that went beyond professional medical curiosity. Ethan, it was a pleasure to see you again. You are a very special boy, she said, bending down to speak at his level. Thank you, Dr. Emily. Are you going to come back to see me again? Ethan asked with innocence. Emily looked at Michael, who was avoiding her gaze before responding. If your dad thinks it's necessary, of course, she replied diplomatically. Michael finally met her eyes, and for a brief moment, Emily saw a mix of fear, protection, and something that could be confusion in his eyes. We'll see, said Michael simply, taking Ethan by the hand and heading for the door. After they left, Emily was alone in her office looking at the notes she had made. There was much more behind that family than met the eye, and she couldn't stop thinking about Ethan's scar and the fragmented memories it had awakened in her mind. For the first time in her medical career, Emily found herself personally invested in a patient's case in a way that went far beyond the professional. There was something about Ethan and Michael that stirred her in a way she couldn't explain, something that made her want to protect them, while simultaneously uncovering the truth that was clearly being hidden. That night, Emily couldn't sleep, thinking about the questions Michael had refused to answer and the disturbing feeling that she had encountered that scar before in her professional memories. 3 weeks had passed since the tense consultation at the hospital, and Michael thought he had managed to shake off Dr. Emily's inconvenient questions. He and Ethan had resumed their usual morning routine, breakfast at 7 a.m. with fresh French bread from Mr. Johnson's bakery, freshly squeezed orange juice, and oatmeal that Michael religiously prepared every morning, following the recipe his mother had taught him years ago. Dad, today we have gym class at school. Did you remember to pack my jersey in my backpack? Ethan asked, finishing his glass of juice while Michael organized the dishes in the sink of their modern kitchen. Of course, champ. It's all in the backpack, Michael replied, adjusting his grey tie that perfectly matched his dark suit. He had an important meeting with clients at the office at 9 a.m. to present the design for a residential building in Brooklyn. The drive to Lincoln Elementary School, where Ethan was in 2nd grade, was always a special moment for the two of them. Ethan shared the dreams he had during the night, always involving adventures with dinosaurs or space travel, while Michael drove through the bustling streets of Midtown, watching the city wake up through the slightly fogged windows from the typical autumn drizzle. Dad, Miss Smith said, there's going to be a special activity at school today. A dentist is coming to teach us how to brush our teeth properly, Ethan excitedly told, swinging his legs in the back seat. That's great, son. Pay close attention, okay? Healthy teeth are very important, said Michael, parking in front of the school gate where other children were arriving with their parents and babysitters. But when Ethan got out of the car and ran toward the gate, Michael was surprised to see someone who left him completely bewildered. Standing next to the school entrance, chatting animatedly with the principal, was Emily. She wore a white coat over dark jeans and comfortable sneakers, carrying a large backpack that obviously contained educational materials. "Dr. Emily!" Ethan shouted excitedly when he saw her, running toward her and completely abandoning the organized line of students. Emily turned at the sound of her name and smiled widely when she saw Ethan running toward her. She bent down to welcome him with a warm hug that made Michael's heart race for reasons he couldn't fully comprehend. "Ethan, what a wonderful surprise to see you here," Emily said, genuinely happy to see him. Do you go to this school? I do. I'm in second grade. Miss Smith is my teacher, and she's really nice, Ethan replied, pointing to a woman in her 30s who approached with a curious smile. Michael slowly approached, still processing what was happening. There was something too coincidental about this encounter, and his protective father instincts immediately kicked in. "Mr. Michael, it's great to see you again," Emily said, extending her hand to greet him, but her smile seemed a bit forced, as if she were also surprised by the meeting. "Dr. Emily," Michael replied politely, shaking her hand and noticing that it was slightly cold, despite the mild day. "I didn't know you also worked with dental education." "Actually, I do volunteer work in health education at some schools in the area. Today I came to talk about oral hygiene with the elementary school kids," Emily explained. But Michael noticed a slight hesitation in her voice. Miss Smith approached, interrupting the tense moment between the adults. "Ethan, dear, you need to go in so you won't be late. The activity starts in 10 minutes, she said, with the typical patience of someone who has worked with children for years. "Okay, Miss Smith. Dad, Dr. Emily is going to teach us today. Isn't that cool?" Ethan said, beaming with the coincidence. "Very cool, son. Now go with Ms. Smith. Daddy needs to go to work," Michael said, kissing Ethan's forehead, but his eyes remained fixed on Emily. After Ethan entered the school, Michael and Emily were left alone in the yard, which was starting to empty as the children went into their classrooms. "What an interesting coincidence," Michael said, his voice laden with skepticism he didn't try to hide. "It really is a coincidence," Emily agreed, adjusting the strap of her backpack on her shoulder. "I've been doing this volunteer work for 3 years. I had no idea Ethan went here." 3 years? Michael questioned, clearly doubting her version. "Yes. I can show you my schedule of visits if you want to verify," Emily replied, a hint of irritation appearing in her voice. "Mr. Michael, I understand. Your protection regarding Ethan is understandable, but you don't need to suspect everything I do." Michael studied her for a moment, trying to decipher if she was being sincere or not. There was something in the way she spoke about Ethan that bothered him. It was too affectionate for someone who had only seen the boy twice. "I'm sorry if I seem suspicious, Doctor. It's just that Ethan is very important to me," Michael said, his voice softening slightly. "I can see that, and it's admirable," Dr. Emily replied, her eyes meeting his for a moment before looking away. "He is a very special child." "Thank you," Michael replied, simply, but he remained there, as if he wanted to say something more. "Mr. Michael, may I ask you a personal question?" Emily ventured, taking advantage of the moment of apparent closeness. Michael hesitated, clearly torn between curiosity and caution. "It depends on the question," he finally replied. "What is it like raising Ethan alone?" "It must be very challenging to balance work and fatherhood," Emily asked, choosing a more indirect approach. Michael visibly relaxed, as if that was a question he could answer without revealing secrets. "It's challenging, but it's also the most rewarding thing in the world," he said, a genuine smile appearing on his face for the first time since he had met her. "Ethan has taught me to be a better person. Before him, I was very focused only on work, projects, and my career. Now everything I do is to give him the best life possible." Emily felt something stir in her chest as she heard the passion in his voice when he spoke about Ethan. There was a purity in that paternal love that touched her deeply. "He is lucky to have such a dedicated father," she said sincerely. "I'm the lucky one." "And for having him," Michael replied, looking at the school where Ethan was starting his activity. "Dr. Emily, may I ask you a question too?" "Of course," Emily responded, but she felt a flutter of nerves. "Why the interest in Ethan? And please be honest with me." Michael looked directly at her, his serious brown eyes determined. Emily fell silent for a long moment, clearly battling an internal struggle. When she finally spoke, her voice was laden with a vulnerability that surprised Michael. "There's something about him that brings me memories, professional memories that I can't fully identify. As a doctor, I've developed an intuition about certain situations, and Ethan awakens that intuition," she explained, choosing her words carefully. "What kind of memories?" Michael pressed, his anxiety returning. "I'm not exactly sure. It's more of a feeling than a clear memory," Emily admitted, "but I can assure you that my concern for Ethan is genuine. I have no hidden agendas." Michael watched her for a long moment, as if trying to see her soul through her green eyes. "I hope that's true, Doctor, because if I find out that you have any hidden agenda regarding my son—" Michael left the threat hanging in the air, but his intention was clear. "I don't, Mr. Michael. You can trust me on that," Emily replied firmly. The school bell rang, indicating that classes had officially started, breaking the tension of the moment. "I need to get to work," Michael said, checking his watch. "Good luck with the activity today." "Thank you. I'm sure Ethan will behave well," Emily said, heading toward the school entrance. Michael watched her enter the building, noticing how she greeted school staff who clearly already knew her, which lent credibility to her story about volunteering. But still, something about that encounter bothered him deeply. Throughout the morning in the office, Michael couldn't fully concentrate on the architectural project he was developing. His lines, usually precise and confident, came out slightly shaky, and he found himself redoing details several times. "Boss, are you okay? You seem worried today," asked Carla, his assistant of 5 years, a highly efficient 28-year-old woman who knew Michael well enough to notice when something was bothering him. "I'm fine, Carla, just personal matters," Michael replied, loosening his tie and leaning back in the ergonomic chair in his office that overlooked Fifth Avenue. "Is it something with Ethan?" Carla asked, with genuine concern. Having followed the boy's growth through the photos Michael kept on his desk and the stories he occasionally shared. "Not exactly. It's more complicated than that," Michael sighed, looking at a photo of Ethan on his desk where the boy was smiling widely, showing the teeth he was starting to lose. At that very moment, Emily was at the school, sitting on the colorful classroom floor of the 2nd grade, surrounded by 20 curious children who were listening to her explain the importance of brushing their teeth. Ethan was sitting right in front of her, paying attention to every word with an interest that went beyond the normal. "Dr. Emily, is it true that if we don't brush our teeth, they can fall out?" asked a girl named Sophia, raising her hand enthusiastically. "Not necessarily fall out, but they can get cavities, which are little holes that hurt a lot," Emily explained, showing a colorful dental model. "My dad always tells me to brush my teeth before bed," Ethan said proudly. "He says that healthy teeth are important for eating well." "Your dad is absolutely right, Ethan. He takes very good care of you," Emily said, smiling at him with a warmth that didn't go unnoticed by Ms. Smith. Throughout the activity, Emily found herself observing Ethan more closely than the other children. The way he held the pencil, how he furrowed his brow when he was focused, how his eyes sparkled when he understood an explanation. Everything about him fascinated her in a way she couldn't rationally explain. When the activity ended and the children went out for recess, Ms. Smith approached Emily. "Ethan seems to have a special connection with you," Ms. Smith observed. As they were putting away the materials they had used, Ms. Smith said, "He talked about you all last week." "Oh, really? What did he say?" Emily asked, trying to sound casual. "That the doctor who took care of him when he was sick was really nice and smelled good," Ms. Smith laughed. "Kids are like that. When they like someone, they can't stop talking." Emily smiled, but inside she felt a mix of joy and confusion. Why was Ethan having such an impact on her life? Why did she feel so connected to that child she had only met a few weeks ago? When the Dismissal time arrived. Emily said goodbye to the school staff and headed to the parking lot. To her surprise, Michael was there, leaning against his car, obviously waiting for her. "Mr. Johnson, is something wrong?" she asked, immediately concerned. "No, everything's fine. I just wanted to talk to you." "Ethan hasn't left yet," Michael said, looking slightly nervous. Emily approached, noticing that he seemed different from the tense man she had met in the morning. There was something more vulnerable in his posture now. "What do you want to talk about?" she asked, stopping at a respectful distance. Michael hesitated, for a moment, as if struggling against his own reserved nature. "I wanted to apologize for being so defensive this morning. Sometimes I overdo it when it comes to protecting Ethan," he admitted, running his hand through his hair in a nervous gesture that Emily was starting to recognize. "You don't need to apologize. I completely understand your position," Emily replied gently. "It's just that raising a child alone makes you a bit paranoid sometimes. Anything that seems to threaten his stability puts me on high alert," Michael explained, his gaze focused on the ground of the parking lot. "I can understand that. It must be a huge responsibility," Emily said, and Michael noticed a genuine sincerity in her voice that made him relax a little more. At that moment, Ethan came running across the schoolyard, his Spider-Man backpack bouncing on his back and a drawing in his hand. "Dad, Dr. Emily, look what I made!" he shouted excitedly, showing a colorful drawing where he had depicted a family. A tall man, a woman in a white coat, and a child in the middle, all holding hands and smiling. Michael and Emily exchanged a quick glance over Ethan's head, both realizing the innocent yet significant implication of the drawing he had made. "Very nice, buddy," Michael said, his voice slightly hoarse. "It's beautiful, Ethan," Emily agreed, but her words came out more emotionally than she intended. And in that moment, standing in the school parking lot with Ethan between them, all three felt that something was changing, that those seemingly casual encounters were creating bonds that none of them had planned, but that might be inevitable. June arrived in New York City, bringing with it the characteristic chill of winter and the typical excitement of country fairs. Lincoln Elementary School was all decorated with colorful banners, crepe paper balloons, and posters announcing the traditional fair that would take place on Saturday night. Ethan came home that Thursday, practically bouncing with excitement. "Dad, Dad, the school country fair is on Saturday, and Miss Smith said there will be square dancing, fishing games, a mail booth, and a mountain of food," Ethan announced, throwing his backpack onto the brown leather sofa in the living room and running to hug Michael, who had just come home from the office. "That's great, champ. Are you going to dance?" Michael asked, loosening his tie and bending down to receive his son's enthusiastic hug. "I am. I'm going to be the groom for Maria Eduarda. She's the prettiest girl in my class," Ethan replied, making an embarrassed face that made Michael laugh. "Then we'll have to make sure your cowboy outfit is perfect, right? How about we go to the mall tomorrow after school to find a nice plaid shirt?" Michael suggested, already mentally organizing his schedule to leave the office early. "Yes. And you're coming with me to the fair, right, Dad? Miss Smith said the whole family should go," Ethan said, his brown eyes shining with anticipation. "Of course I will, buddy. I wouldn't miss it for the world," Michael replied, kissing the top of Ethan's head. What Michael didn't realize was that Emily had also been invited to the fair. On Friday night, she received a phone call from the school principal, Ms. Johnson, a 55-year-old woman who had been running the institution for over a decade. "Dr. Emily, I hope you don't mind the call at home. We have a small problem for tomorrow," Ms. Johnson said, her voice heavy with concern. "Of course, go ahead. How can I help?" Emily replied, pausing the soap opera she was watching in her cozy apartment in Upper East Side, decorated with plants and photographs from her travels across the country. "The volunteer nurse who was supposed to be on duty during the fair had a family issue and won't be able to come. Since you already know the kids and have medical experience, could you help us out? It's just to be on standby in case any child gets hurt or feels unwell, the principal explained. Emily hesitated for a moment, immediately thinking of Ethan and Michael. Since their encounter in the school parking, like 3 weeks ago, she hadn't been able to stop thinking about them. There was something about that family that attracted her in a way she couldn't rationally explain. "Of course, Miss Johnson. You can count on me," Emily replied, already knowing she was making a decision that could complicate her emotional situation even further. Saturday dawned cold, but sunny, typical of New York City's winter. Ethan woke up at 7 a.m., an hour earlier than usual, so excited for the fair. "Dad, can I put on my cowboy outfit now?" he asked, jumping on Michael's bed as he did on weekends. "Hold on, buddy. The party only starts at 7 p.m. Let's have coffee, have lunch, play a bit, and then you can get ready," said Michael, laughing at the boy's excitement. During lunch, Michael prepared Gabriel's favorite dish, spaghetti bolognese with grated cheese, accompanied by grape juice and a slice of carrot cake he had bought at Mr. Thompson's bakery. While they ate, Gabriel couldn't stop talking about the party preparations. "Dad, Miss Smith practiced the square dance with us all week. I know all the steps. Look at the rain, look at the snake, tunnel. It's so much fun," Gabriel exclaimed, gesturing with his fork. "I can't wait to see it," Michael said, genuinely excited to see his son so happy. At 6:30 p.m., Michael and Gabriel were ready to leave. Gabriel wore a red and blue plaid shirt, patched jeans sewn by Michael, who had discovered sewing talents he didn't know he had, a straw hat, and had his face painted with a brown, pencil-drawn beard. Michael opted for a simple plaid shirt, dark jeans, and also a straw hat, creating a father-son combination that didn't go unnoticed when they arrived at the school. The schoolyard had been completely transformed. Colorful flags fluttered in the chilly night breeze. Artificial bonfires, made with red and yellow cellophane illuminated from within, decorated the corners, and several stalls offered typical foods: popcorn, corn pudding, hot spice cider, mulled wine, coconut candy, peanut brittle, and the traditional corn on the cob with butter. "Wow, Dad, look how beautiful it turned out," Gabriel exclaimed, his eyes sparkling with all the decorations. "It really is beautiful," Michael agreed, breathing in the aroma of cinnamon and cloves wafting from the hot spiced cider stall. They had barely entered when Gabriel was approached by his classmates, all equally dressed as cowboys, and quickly got involved in the games that were already happening. Michael took the opportunity to buy 2 cups of hot spice cider and find a strategic spot from which he could watch Gabriel having fun. It was while savoring the warm, spiced drink that he saw her. Emily was near the first aid table, talking to Ms. Johnson. She wore a navy blue skirt with a floral pattern, a white long-sleeve blouse, and a headband with artificial flowers in her loose hair. Over it, a red vest completed the cowboy, look that made her even more beautiful than Michael remembered. As if she felt his gaze, Emily turned in his direction. Their eyes met across the bustling yard, and she discreetly waved. After a moment of hesitation, Michael returned the wave. "Dr. Emily is here," Gabriel shouted when he saw her, immediately abandoning the fishing game and running towards her. "Gabriel, what a handsome cowboy," Emily said, bending down to receive the enthusiastic hug he gave her. "You look beautiful too. You look like a real cowboy," Gabriel said, admiring her outfit with the typical honesty of children. Michael approached, carrying the 2 cups of hot spiced cider. "Good evening, Doctor. I didn't know you were coming to the party," he said, offering one of the cups to her. "Good evening, Mr. Michael. I came as a volunteer medical professional in case any child gets hurt," Emily explained, accepting the hot spiced cider with a grateful smile. "Thank you. It's freezing today." "Yeah, winter has really hit hard this year," Michael agreed, watching as she gently blew on the hot liquid before drinking. Dad, Dr. Emily, come see the fishing game. I already caught 3 little fish, Gabriel interrupted, pulling both adults by the hands towards the stall. For the next hour, Michael watched Emily interact with Gabriel and other children from the school. She had a natural ease in communicating with them, bending down to their level, listening attentively to their wild stories, and participating in the games with a genuine enthusiasm that impressed him. "She's really good with kids," commented Ms. Smith, approaching Michael as they watched Emily help Gabriel with the ring toss game. "Yes, she is. It's a profession, I imagine," Michael replied, but internally he knew it went beyond her profession. There was something special in the way she looked at Gabriel. "I don't know. I know many doctors who are excellent professionally, but don't have that special way with kids. She's different," Ms. Smith said, and Michael realized that the teacher was right. When it was time for the square dance, the entire school community gathered in the center of the yard. The children formed pairs, with Gabriel proudly escorting Emily, a shy girl with curly hair who was visibly nervous. "It's okay, Emily. Just follow the steps we practiced," Michael heard Gabriel whisper to his partner, demonstrating a kindness that made his chest swell with paternal pride. The music started, an upbeat version of Jump Over the Fire, and the children began to dance. Michael watched emotionally, recording everything on his phone, when he noticed that Emily was also filming, a radiant smile on her face. "Look at the rain! It's a lie! Look at the snake! It's wood!" shouted the announcer, and the children followed the commands with an adorable but imperfect synchronization that drew laughter and applause from the adults. During the tunnel, when the couples passed under the raised arms of the other participants, Gabriel waved excitedly to Michael and Emily, who were side by side in the audience. "He's doing really well," Emily commented, putting her phone away. "Yeah, he practiced all week at home. He even made me be Emily several times," Michael laughed, relaxing for the first time that night. "I can imagine it must be funny to see you dancing square dance in your living room." Emily laughed too, and Michael noticed how her laughter was musical and contagious. When the music ended and the children took a collective bow, the entire audience erupted in applause. Gabriel ran to Michael, sweaty and radiant. "Dad, did you see? We didn't miss a single step," he said, practically bouncing with happiness. "I saw it, son. You were perfect." Michael hugged him, kissing his warm forehead. "Dr. Emily saw it too. She even filmed it." Ethan pointed to Emily. "Of course I filmed it. You were the best couples in the dance," said Emily, bending down to be at Ethan's level. "Do you want to see the video later?" Ethan asked innocently. "Ethan," Michael began to reprimand, but Emily interrupted him. "I would love to see it, Ethan, but only if your dad allows it," she said, looking at Michael with an expression that mixed hope and nervousness. Michael hesitated for a moment. Every protective instinct he had warned him to keep his distance, but looking at Ethan's radiant face and Emily's sincere green eyes, he felt his resistance melting away. "Sure. Do you want to sit over there in the stands to watch?" Michael suggested, pointing to the chairs that had been arranged around the yard. The three settled into the wooden stands, with Ethan in the middle, while Michael showed the videos he had recorded on his phone. Emily leaned in to see the screen better, and Michael became intensely aware of her proximity, the soft floral perfume she wore, mixed with the cinnamon aroma of the caramel corn still in his hands. "Look there, Dr. Emily! That part where I spun Emily!" Ethan pointed to the screen excitedly, completely oblivious to the subtle tension hanging between the adults. "You were very gentlemanly with her," praised Emily. "Your moms must have raised you very well." The phrase came out naturally, but as soon as the words left her mouth, Emily realized the mistake. Ethan furrowed his brow, confused. "My moms? I only have a dad," Ethan said, looking at Michael for clarification. Michael felt all the blood in his body freeze. Emily immediately recognized the error and tried to correct it. "Sorry, Ethan. I meant your dad. Sometimes people misspeak," she said quickly, but the damage was done. Michael was looking at her with an expression that mixed surprise, suspicion, and something that could be fear. There was something in the way Emily had spoken about moms in the plural that suggested prior knowledge of his family situation. "Ethan, how about you go get some caramel corn for us?" Michael suggested, pulling out some bills from his wallet. "Get some for you, for me, and for Dr. Emily." "Okay, Dad." Ethan grabbed the money and ran toward the caramel corn stand. As soon as Ethan walked away, Michael turned to Emily with a serious expression. "How did you know that Ethan doesn't have a mom?" he asked directly, his voice low but loaded with tension. Emily felt her heart race. She had made an unforgivable mistake, revealing knowledge she shouldn't have had. I deduced. You always talk about him as if you were raising him alone, and Ethan never mentioned a mom," she tried to explain, but she knew it sounded unconvincing. "Interesting deduction," Michael said, clearly not believing her explanation. "Dr. Emily, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I would like an honest answer. Have you investigated our family?" The silence that followed was thick with tension. Emily knew she was at a point of no return. She could lie and try to maintain the facade, or she could start revealing the truth she was discovering about herself. "Mr. Johnson, may I be honest with you?" she finally asked. "Please," Michael replied, bracing himself for what might come. "There's something about Ethan that feels familiar to me in a way I can't explain. As a doctor, I've treated thousands of children over the years, but none have impacted me the way he has," Emily began, choosing her words carefully. "That scar on his shoulder. I have a feeling I've seen it before, in another context." Michael felt as if the ground was shifting beneath his feet. "What context?" he asked, his voice almost a whisper. "I'm not sure. They're fragmented memories, feelings more than clear recollections," Emily admitted. "But there's something about Ethan's story that doesn't fit, and my medical intuition won't let me ignore it." Michael remained silent for a long moment, watching Ethan in line for the caramel corn, chatting animatedly with other kids. When he finally spoke, his voice was loaded with an emotion that Emily couldn't identify. "Dr. Emily, Ethan is my son in every way that matters. I've cared for him since he was a baby. I love him more than my own life, and I would do anything to protect him," Michael said, his eyes fixed on Ethan. "If you have any doubts about our family, about our documents, about our history, I prefer you keep those doubts to yourself. Mr. Johnson, I don't intend to harm you in any way," Emily said sincerely. "But what if there's something about Ethan's medical history that could be important for his future?" "Like what?" Michael asked, a part of him wanting to end the conversation, and another part desperately curious about what she might know. "I'm not sure. But that scar, Mr. Johnson, is there any possibility that Ethan was adopted?" Emily ventured the question that had been burning in her mind for weeks. Michael's reaction was immediate and intense. He abruptly stood up from the stands, his hands trembling slightly. "Our conversation ends here, Doctor," he said with a firmness that made Emily realize she had gone too far. At that moment, Ethan came running back with 3 bags of caramel corn, completely oblivious to the tension that had settled between the adults. "Look, I got popcorn for everyone," he announced happily, offering the bags. Michael forced a smile, accepting his popcorn and ruffling Ethan's hair. "Thank you, champ. How about we head home now? It's getting late and tomorrow you have soccer at the club," Michael suggested. "But Dad, there's still the bonfire and the fireworks," Ethan protested. "Another day?" Ethan looked up at his father. "We've had a lot of fun today," Michael insisted, clearly eager to leave. Emily observed the interaction between father and son, feeling her heart tighten. "Ethan, it was great to see you dancing today. You were perfect," she said, bidding farewell to the boy. "Thank you, Dr. Emily. Are you coming to the next school fair?" Ethan asked innocently. Emily glanced at Michael, who was avoiding her gaze before responding. "We'll see, sweetheart. It depends if they need me," she replied diplomatically. "Bye, Dr. Emily." Ethan waved as Michael took his hand and led him toward the exit. "Goodbye, Ethan. Goodbye, Mr. Johnson," Emily replied. But Michael did not return the farewell. She stood by the bleachers, watching them walk away through the school gate, knowing she had made a mistake that could have irreversible consequences. But she also knew she couldn't stop searching for answers to the questions Ethan had awakened in her mind. That night, both Michael and Emily struggled to sleep, each processing the encounter in different ways, but both knowing that something fundamental had changed between them during that school fair that was supposed to be just innocent fun. 2 weeks had passed since the school fair, and Michael couldn't shake the question Emily had asked about adoption. Every time he looked at Ethan, whether during breakfast, when the boy chewed his toast with strawberry jam while focused on some cartoon, or at night when he tucked him in and Ethan insisted on hearing the same story about the friendly dragon protecting a village, Michael felt a weight in his chest that he couldn't fully explain. The routine continued normally on the surface. Every morning, Michael woke up at 6:30, made breakfast while Ethan took a shower singing songs he learned at school, and they both left promptly at 7:45, so Ethan would arrive at school on time and Michael wouldn't be late for the office. But there was an underlying tension that Ethan, with his typical sharp perception of children, began to notice. "Dad, are you sad?" Ethan asked one Thursday, while Michael helped him with his math homework at the kitchen table. The apartment was quiet, only the low sound of the television in the living room and the distant noise of traffic on Fifth Avenue. "Why do you think that, son?" Michael asked, pausing the correction of the addition exercises Ethan had done. "You're making that face you make when you have a lot of work at the office. But you didn't talk about work today," Ethan observed, with the disconcerting precision he sometimes displayed. Michael sighed, lowering the pencil and looking at his son, who was watching him with brown eyes full of genuine concern. "Sometimes adults think about complicated things, Ethan. It's nothing you need to worry about," Michael said, stroking the boy's hair. "Is it about Dr. Emily?" Ethan asked, surprising Michael with the direct question. "Why do you ask that?" Michael questioned, trying to keep his voice neutral. "Because since the school fair, you get a bit weird when someone talks about her. And you liked Dr. Emily before," Ethan said with the brutal honesty of children. Michael realized he couldn't completely hide his feelings from Ethan. The boy was too smart and knew him too well not to notice subtle changes in behavior. "Ethan, sometimes adults have misunderstandings. It doesn't mean we don't like the person anymore. It just means we need some time to think," Michael explained, choosing his words carefully. "Did you fight?" Ethan asked, his eyes widening with concern. "Not exactly. It was more like different opinions about some things," Michael said, surprising himself with his ability to explain complex situations appropriately for a child. Ethan was quiet for a moment, clearly processing the information. "I like Dr. Emily," he finally said. "She's nice and smells good, and she looks at me like you look at me, you know?" "What do you mean, son?" Michael asked, intrigued. "Like she really likes me, not just because she has to," Ethan explained with a simplicity that made Michael's heart ache. That same night, after putting Ethan to bed, Michael poured himself a glass of red wine and sat on the apartment balcony, looking at the lights of the city that never sleeps. His reflections were interrupted by the sound of his phone. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" Michael answered hesitantly. "Mr. Johnson, this is Dr. Emily. Please don't hang up," said the voice on the other end, laden with urgency and nervousness. Michael hesitated for a moment, his first reaction being to hang up immediately. But something in her voice made him stay on the line. "What do you want, Doctor?" he asked, his voice cold, but not hostile. "I need to talk to you. I discovered something important about Ethan," Emily said, and Michael could hear the nervousness in her breath. "What kind of thing?" Michael asked, feeling his heart race. "I can't talk over the phone. It's very delicate. Can we meet tomorrow, somewhere neutral?" Emily requested. Michael fell silent for a long moment, battling his curiosity and protective instincts. "If it's to ask more invasive questions about my family, I'm not interested," he finally said. "Mr. Johnson, please. I found old medical records from when I was a resident 7 years ago," Emily said, her voice almost whispering. The phrase hit Michael like a bolt of lightning. 7 years ago was exactly when... "Where do you want to meet?" he asked, his resistance crumbling instantly. "Girondino Café on 5th Avenue. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Ethan will be at school," Emily suggested. "I'll be there," Michael agreed, hanging up the phone with trembling hands. The next morning, Michael could barely concentrate on work. His architect desk, usually organized with millimetric precision, the office was covered in scattered papers and half-finished projects. Sarah, his assistant, immediately noticed that something was wrong. "Boss, are you sure you're okay? This is the 3rd time you've redone the same structural calculation," she observed, pointing to the scribbled notes. "Just personal issues, Sarah. I'm leaving early today, okay? If any clients call, transfer them to tomorrow," Michael said, putting the papers into his folder without the usual organization. "Sure. I hope you can sort out what's bothering you," Sarah said with the genuine concern of someone who has worked with someone for years. Central Perk was bustling that Friday afternoon, filled with executives in work meetings and college students with open laptops. Michael arrived 5 minutes before the scheduled time and chose a table in the back, away from the windows overlooking 5th Avenue, where they could talk privately. Emily arrived promptly at 2 p.m., carrying a brown folder that seemed to contain important documents. She wore a navy blue blouse, black dress pants, and a beige wool coat, her professional appearance contrasting with the nervous expression on her face. "Mr. Johnson, thank you for coming," she said, sitting in the chair across from him. "Let's get straight to the point, Doctor. What did you find out?" Michael said bluntly, his hands clasped on the table. Emily opened the folder and pulled out some photocopied pages, clearly copies of old medical records. 3 weeks ago, after the country fair, I started having strange dreams. Fragments of memories that I couldn't fully locate," she began, organizing the papers on the table. "I decided to look through the files at the hospital where I did my residency." Michael watched the documents, unable to clearly read the content from a distance, but he could see they were official medical records. "And what did you find?" he asked, his voice tense. "Exactly 7 years and 4 months ago at New York General Hospital, I treated an emergency case. A 28-year-old man had suffered a severe car accident. He was accompanied by a child approximately 7 months old." Emily paused, watching Michael's reaction. Michael felt as if all the air had been sucked from his lungs. His hands began to tremble imperceptibly. "Continue," he said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "The man had severe head injuries and multiple fractures. The child had been protected by the car seat and only had superficial injuries. But one of the shards of glass from the windshield caused a cut on the right shoulder that needed stitches," Emily continued, pointing to a specific section of the medical record. "Doctor, where are you going with this?" Michael asked, although he already knew exactly where she was headed. "Mr. Johnson, that child was Ethan," Emily said firmly. "The scar on his shoulder is identical to the one I stitched that night." The silence that followed was deafening. Michael stared at the documents on the table as if they were bombs about to explode. "And the man who was with Ethan," Michael finally asked. According to the records, he was the child's father, David Johnson, your older brother, Emily said gently, watching Michael visibly pale. David, Michael whispered the name, closing his eyes as if trying to block painful memories. Mr. Johnson, I need to know what happened that night. Why is Ethan with you and not with his biological father? Emily asked delicately, realizing she was dealing with something extremely sensitive. Michael remained silent for a long moment, clearly battling an intense internal struggle. When he finally spoke, his voice was laden with a pain he had kept hidden for years. David never fully recovered from the accident, Michael said, his voice low and controlled. He survived, but the brain damage was extensive. He has been in a specialized clinic for 7 years. And Ethan? Emily asked gently. Ethan was left with no one. His biological mother. She abandoned David when Ethan was 3 months old. She said she wasn't ready to be a mother, Michael explained, his words coming out with difficulty. When David had the accident, I was the only close relative. I took custody of Ethan. Emily absorbed the information in silence, beginning to understand the complexity of the situation. But Mr. Johnson, in the official documents, you appear as Ethan's father, not as his guardian uncle, she noted, consulting the notes she had made. Michael looked directly at her for the first time since she had started talking about the medical records. Dr. Emily, Ethan was 7 months old when this happened. He has no memory of David as a father. To him, I have always been his father since he could understand, Michael said, with an intensity that made Emily realize the depth of his love for Ethan. I understand the emotional situation, but legally, Emily began. Legally, everything is in order, Michael interrupted. I have full legal custody of Ethan. David, in his current state, is not capable of exercising fatherhood. Have you talked to David about this? Does he know that Ethan is being raised as his son? Emily asked. Michael hesitated before answering, and Emily realized she had touched on another extremely sensitive point. David has moments of clarity, but it's complicated, Michael finally said. He understands that Ethan is well taken care of. That's what matters. Mr. Johnson, may I ask a very personal question? Emily ventured. I think it's well past time for formalities, Doctor. Ask away, Michael replied with a bitter smile. Why didn't you tell Ethan the truth? Why doesn't he know that you are his uncle? She asked. Michael fell silent for a long moment, watching the bustle of the cafe around him, people living their normal lives while his was being dissected at that table. Because Ethan deserves a normal and stable family, Michael finally said. He deserves a father who is present every day, who helps him with his homework, who celebrates his birthdays, who comforts him when he... David has nightmares. Michael, the way he is, he can't be that father. But what about when Ethan grows up? What if he discovers the truth on his own? Emily gently pressed. When that happens, I'll explain everything to him. But for now, he has a happy and secure childhood. That's more important than biological labels, Michael said with conviction. Emily observed Michael for a moment, seeing the determination and genuine love in his eyes when he spoke about Ethan. Mr. Johnson, can you take me to meet David? She suddenly asked. The question caught Michael completely off guard. Why? He asked. Because I need to fully understand the situation before making any decisions about what to do. With this information, Emily explained. What kind of decision? Michael asked, a hint of fear creeping into his voice. Mr. Johnson, as a doctor, I have certain ethical responsibilities. But as a person, as someone who genuinely cares about Ethan, I want to understand all the nuances of the situation before deciding the best way to proceed, Emily explained honestly. Michael studied her face for a long moment, trying to decipher her intentions. If I take you to meet David, can I trust that you will maintain complete discretion about this situation? He asked. You can trust me, Emily replied, without hesitation. Sunday afternoon. Can I pick you up here at 2 p.m.? Michael suggested, clearly making a decision that made him nervous. I'll be here, Emily agreed. When they stood up to leave, Michael turned to her one last time. Dr. Emily, Ethan is happy. He has a good life, a family that loves him, a promising future. Please remember that when you make your decisions, he said, with a vulnerability she hadn't seen before. I understand, Mr. Johnson, and I promise that Ethan's well-being will be my top priority in any decision I make, Emily replied sincerely. That night, both went home, carrying the weight of revelations that fundamentally changed the dynamic between them. Michael found himself in a vulnerable position he hadn't experienced in years, while Emily grappled with ethical and emotional questions she had never faced in her medical career. The approaching Sunday promised to bring even more revelations that could forever alter the future of that unconventional family formed through tragic circumstances and unconditional love. Sunday dawned cloudy in New York City, with the typical fine drizzle of winter that left the windows fogged and created a melancholic atmosphere in the city. Michael woke up, earlier than usual, at 6 a.m., and lay in bed, watching Ethan sleep in the next room through the slightly open door. The boy slept peacefully, hugging his favorite stuffed dinosaur, completely unaware of the revelations that had shaken his father's world in recent days. During breakfast, Ethan noticed that Michael was quieter than usual. "Dad, are we going to the park today?" Ethan asked, chewing on a slice of toast with jam while watching cartoons on TV. "Not today, buddy. Daddy needs to take care of some work things this afternoon," Michael lied, hating himself for not being completely honest with Ethan. "Oh, can I go to João Pedro's house then? His mom said I could have lunch there," Ethan suggested, referring to his best friend from school. "Of course, champ. I'll take you there after lunch and pick you up in the evening," Michael agreed, actually relieved to have an excuse to keep Ethan safe while he dealt with the delicate situation awaiting him. At exactly 2 p.m., Michael parked in front of Central Perk and saw Emily waiting on the sidewalk. She was wearing dark jeans, a beige wool sweater, and a brown jacket, her casual appearance, contrasting with the evident nervousness in her posture. When she got into the car, Michael noticed that she was carrying a small handbag and seemed to have had a rough night. "Good afternoon, Doctor," Michael greeted, noticing the discreet dark circles under her eyes. "Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson. Thank you for doing this," Emily replied, fastening her seatbelt. The drive to Johnson Care Center in the west side of the city was filled with tense silence. Michael drove with concentration, his hands firm on the wheel, while Emily watched the urban landscape pass by the window. Only the soft sound of the radio playing soft rock broke the silence in the car. The clinic was a 5-story building, painted white with light blue accents, surrounded by well-kept gardens trying to create a welcoming atmosphere for a place dedicated to long-term care. In the parking lot, Michael turned off the engine and paused for a moment, clearly gathering courage. "Mr. Johnson, if it's too difficult for you, I can go in alone," Emily kindly offered. "No, I need to be there. David, he gets more agitated with unfamiliar people," Michael explained, stepping out of the car. At the reception, a middle-aged nurse with a maternal smile greeted Michael like a regular visitor. "Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson. How is Ethan? It's been a while since you brought him to visit," the nurse, whose badge identified her as Nurse Sonia, said. "Ethan is doing well, Sonia. Today I brought a doctor with me, Dr. Emily. She recently met Ethan and would like to meet David," Michael explained, carefully choosing his words. "Of course, David is having a good day today. He even finished his breakfast, which he hasn't done in weeks," Sonia informed with the professional optimism of someone who works in special care. They ascended to the third floor, walking through clean corridors that smelled of disinfectant mixed with the aroma of flowers from the indoor gardens. Michael stopped in front of a door with a small plaque. David Johnson, room 312. Doctor, before we go in, David sometimes doesn't recognize me immediately. Other times he is completely lucid. It's impossible to predict, Michael explained, his hand on the doorknob. Emily nodded, mentally preparing herself for the encounter. The room was spacious and well lit, with a hospital bed, a comfortable armchair, a small television, and several photographs on the walls. Emily immediately noticed that many of the photos showed Ethan at different ages, from baby to more recent pictures, and Michael was always beside the boy. David was sitting in the armchair, looking out the window. He was 35 years old, but appeared older due to his prematurely graying hair and the distant expression in his eyes. Physically, he was obviously Michael's brother. Same bone structure, same brown eyes, but there was a fragility in his posture that contrasted with Michael's solidity. "David, I brought a visitor for you," Michael said gently, approaching the armchair. David turned slowly, his eyes taking a moment to focus on Michael. When he finally recognized him, a genuine smile lit up his face. "Mike! You came!" David exclaimed, his voice filled with childlike joy. "Where's Ethan? He always comes with you." Michael and Emily exchanged a quick glance. It was one of David's lucid days. "Ethan is playing with a little friend today. I brought Dr. Emily to meet you," Michael explained, gesturing to Emily. David looked at Emily with curiosity, but without the typical distrust he showed towards strangers on bad days. "Doctor, do you take care of Ethan?" David asked directly. "I met Ethan recently. I'm a pediatrician," Emily replied, moving closer and sitting in the chair that Michael had pulled up beside the armchair. "Ethan is a special child, right, Doctor?" David said, his eyes shining with paternal pride. "He's smart, loving, brave, just like his dad." David looked at Michael as he said this, and Emily sensed the complexity of the situation. David clearly knew that Michael was raising Ethan, but in his confused mind, the lines between uncle and father had blurred. "Tell me about Ethan when he was a baby," Emily gently requested. David visibly perked up at the question. "Oh, he was the cutest baby in the world. Always smiling, never cried much. He loved music. I used to sing him to sleep every night," David said, his hands moving as if he were cradling a child. Michael watched the interaction, clearly moved to see David talking about Ethan. "David, do you remember the accident?" Emily ventured to ask the delicate question. David's expression changed immediately, becoming confused and slightly agitated. "Accident? What accident?" he asked, looking between Emily and Michael. "It's not important, David. It's okay," Michael quickly intervened, realizing that this line of questioning was making David uncomfortable. "But," David insisted, a determination rising in his eyes, "Mike, sometimes I have flashes of rain, broken glass, sirens." "Was Ethan with me?" David asked, his voice growing tense. Michael leaned in, kneeling beside David's armchair. "David, Ethan is safe. He's fine, growing strong and healthy. That's what matters," Michael said with a tenderness that made Emily's heart ache. "But does he know that I—" David started, but his words got lost in mental confusion. "David, Ethan knows that you love him very much. That's what matters," Michael replied, avoiding the direct question. Emily observed the dynamic between the brothers, beginning to understand the emotional complexity of the situation. David clearly loved Ethan, but he also seemed to understand, on some level, that he was not in a position to care for him. "Dr. Emily," David suddenly turned to her, "do you think Ethan is happy?" The direct question caught Emily off guard. She looked into David's eyes and saw a momentary and profound lucidity. "Yes, David, Ethan is a very happy child. He is loved, cared for, has a stable life and a bright future ahead, Emily answered sincerely. And Michael, is he a good dad to Ethan? David asked, his voice laden with a vulnerability that broke Emily's heart. Michael is an exceptional father, Emily replied without hesitation. Ethan is lucky to have someone who loves him so much. David nodded, seeming satisfied with the answer. Then suddenly he took Michael's hand. Mike, promise me you'll keep taking care of Ethan as if he were your son, David asked, his voice clear and determined. Michael felt tears forming in his eyes. David, I promise. Ethan will always be my son, in every way that matters, Michael said, squeezing his brother's hand. Then it's okay. Then it's all okay, David said, visibly relaxing. They spent another hour at the clinic, talking about lighter subjects. David showed some of the photos of Ethan, shared fragmented stories from when he was a child with Michael, and even laughed when Michael recalled the mischief they used to get into during childhood. When it was time to leave, David hugged Michael tightly. Thank you, brother. Thank you for everything, David whispered in Michael's ear. I love you, David. Ethan does too, Michael replied, his voice choked. In the car on the way back, Emily and Michael remained silent for a long time, each processing the encounter in different ways. He knows, Emily finally said. What? Michael asked, though he knew exactly what she was talking about. David knows that you're raising Ethan as your son, and he approves. More than that, he's grateful, Emily explained. David has moments of great lucidity. In those moments he understands the situation perfectly, Michael admitted. Mr. Johnson, may I ask a personal question? Emily requested. Now any question seems less invasive than it would have a week ago, Michael replied with a sad smile. Did you always want to be a father? She asked. Michael thought for a moment before responding. Honestly, I never seriously thought about fatherhood before Ethan. I was focused on my career, my projects, building a solid professional life, he admitted. But when Ethan came into my life, it was as if a part of me I didn't know existed awakened. There was a time when I existed, and you don't regret it. The responsibility, the changes in your life, Emily gently pressed. Never, not for a second, Michael replied without hesitation. Ethan made me discover what kind of man I really want to be. Before him, I existed. After him, I live. Emily felt something stir in her chest as she heard the passion in Michael's voice when he spoke about Ethan. And legally, how does the situation work? She asked. I have full legal custody. When David was declared incapacitated, I filed for adoption. Ethan is officially my son in the eyes of the law, Michael explained. But on the birth certificates, Emily began, they were legally altered during the adoption process. Ethan is Ethan Johnson, son of Michael Johnson. There is no mention of David in the official documents, Michael clarified. Emily absorbed the information in silence. Doctor, may I ask what you intend to do with this information? Michael asked, clearly nervous. Honestly, I don't know yet, Emily admitted. But I can promise one thing. After what I saw today, I know that Ethan is exactly where he should be. Thank you, Michael said simply, but Emily noticed the relief in his voice. May I continue to follow Ethan medically, as his pediatrician? Emily asked hesitantly. Michael watched her for a moment, as if trying to decipher her motivations. Why would you want to do that? He asked. Because I care about him, and because I care. About you both, Emily admitted, surprising herself with her own honesty. Michael didn't respond immediately, but Emily saw something change in his expression, a softening of the guard he had maintained since the country fair. Let's see how things evolve, Michael finally said, and Emily realized it was the most positive opening she would receive at that moment. When they returned to Central Perk, Before Emily got out of the car, Michael turned to her. "Doctor, thank you for today. It was important for me that you met David," he said sincerely. "Thank you for trusting me," Emily replied. "David is a special man, and Ethan is lucky to have both you and David loving him." That night, as Michael picked up Ethan from his friend's house and eagerly listened to the day's adventures, he felt lighter than he had in weeks. For the first time, someone knew the whole truth about his family, and instead of judgment, he had found understanding. Emily, for her part, spent the night reflecting on the complexity of familial love and how her rigid definitions of right and wrong had been challenged by a family formed through tragic circumstances but flourishing through unconditional love. 3 weeks passed since the clinic visit, and a new dynamic had established itself between Michael, Ethan, and Emily. What started as casual medical appointments was transforming into something deeper and more meaningful. Emily began to show up in everyday moments of Ethan's life, no longer just as a doctor, but as someone genuinely interested in his well-being. One Wednesday afternoon, Michael was at the playground in Central Park with Ethan when he received an unexpected call. It was Emily, but her voice sounded different, warmer, less formal. "Michael, sorry to call like this, but do you and Ethan have plans for Saturday afternoon?" she asked, using his first name for the first time since they met. "We don't have anything specific." "Why?" Michael replied, watching Ethan play on the colorful slide while other kids ran around. "There's a dinosaur exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History. I thought Ethan might enjoy it," Emily suggested, a nervous hesitation in her voice. Michael smiled involuntarily. Emily had clearly paid attention to the conversations, where Ethan obsessively talked about dinosaurs. "I'm sure he would love it. What time were you thinking?" Michael asked, already knowing it would be impossible to refuse when Ethan found out about the invitation. "How about 2 p.m.? I can meet you at the museum entrance," she suggested. "Ethan is going to be ecstatic." "Thank you so much for the invitation, Emily," Michael said, using her first name as well. When Michael hung up and told Ethan about the invitation, the reaction was exactly what he expected. "Seriously, Dad? Dr. Emily is coming with us to see real dinosaurs?" Ethan shouted, jumping off the swing and running towards Michael. "Calm down, champ. They're skeletons and replicas, not living dinosaurs," Michael laughed. But internally he was surprised by his own excitement at the thought of spending an afternoon with Emily. On Saturday, Ethan woke up at 6 a.m., 2 hours earlier than usual, so great was his anxiety for the exhibit. During breakfast, he couldn't stop asking questions about dinosaurs and about Dr. Emily, who was nice and smelled good. "Dad, do you think Dr. Emily likes dinosaurs too?" Ethan asked while chewing his toast with jelly. "I don't know, buddy. We'll find out today," Michael replied. But he noticed he was more excited than he should be for a simple educational outing. They arrived at the American Museum of Natural History 15 minutes before the agreed time, but Emily was already there, waiting at the entrance. She wore jeans, comfortable sneakers, a light green blouse, and a brown leather jacket. Her hair was down, and she looked younger and more relaxed than Michael had ever seen her. "Dr. Emily!" Ethan ran towards her as soon as he saw her, receiving a warm hug that made several people around smile at the scene. "Ethan, are you ready to meet some dinosaurs?" Emily asked, bending down to his level. "I'm super ready. Did you know that? The Tyrannosaurus Rex had 20-centimeter teeth." Ethan immediately began to share his knowledge about dinosaurs. "I didn't know. How impressive. I bet you're going to teach me a lot today," Emily replied, genuinely interested, making Ethan puff up with pride. Michael watched the interaction between them. They noticed how Emily had prepared for the outing. She wasn't just being polite. She genuinely seemed excited to spend the afternoon with them. Inside the museum, Ethan was in paradise. The exhibit was impressive, featuring complete dinosaur skeletons, interactive replicas, and multimedia presentations explaining life in the age of dinosaurs. Ethan ran from one display to another, explaining to Emily everything he knew about each species. "Dad, look, it's a triceratops. They were herbivores and used their horns to protect themselves from carnivores," Ethan excitedly explained, pointing at the imposing skeleton. "Very interesting, son," said Michael, taking pictures of Ethan in front of the skeleton. "Emily, would you like me to take a picture of you two with the triceratops?" Michael offered spontaneously. Emily hesitated for a moment, but Ethan immediately pulled her closer to the skeleton. "Come on, Dr. Emily. It'll be fun," Ethan insisted. Emily positioned herself next to Ethan, her hand naturally resting on his shoulder as they both smiled for the camera. Michael looked through the lens of his phone and for a moment felt as if he were photographing his own family. "Perfect," said Michael, showing them the photo. In the image, Emily and Ethan looked completely natural together, as if this closeness had always existed. During a break at the museum cafe, while Ethan was fascinated by a dinosaur book that Emily had bought for him at the gift shop, the two adults managed to have a more intimate conversation. "Thank you for thinking of him. And for this outing, Ethan is beaming," said Michael, watching his son leaf through the book with total concentration. "Honestly, when I saw the announcement for the exhibit, I immediately thought of him. It's impossible not to think of Ethan when you see anything related to dinosaurs," Emily replied with a smile. "Emily, can I ask you a personal question?" Michael ventured. "Sure," she replied, taking a sip of the coffee she had ordered. "Why are you doing this? Investing time in Ethan, in us?" Michael asked directly. Emily was silent for a moment, clearly pondering her answer. "Initially it was professional curiosity mixed with medical intuition," she admitted. "But now it's something different. Ethan touches something in me that I didn't know existed." "What do you mean?" Michael gently pressed. "I've never had children. I never saw myself as a maternal person. My career has always been my top priority," Emily explained, her eyes focused on Ethan. "But with Ethan, it's like a part of me that was dormant has been awakened." Michael watched her speak, noticing the genuine sincerity in her voice. "And you?" Emily suddenly asked. "Why are you allowing me to get close? I know your first reaction was one of protection and suspicion." "Because Ethan likes you," Michael replied simply, "and because you understand our family. Even with all the complexity, you understand that love is what defines us." "And you? How do you feel about me?" Emily asked with a courage that surprised her. Michael hesitated, clearly choosing his words carefully. "Emily, I haven't allowed anyone to enter our lives in a meaningful way for a long time. Ethan is my absolute priority, and anyone who wants to be part of our routine needs to understand that," Michael said. "But you not only understand, you embrace it, and that is rare." Before Emily could respond, Ethan came running back to the table, interrupting the intimate moment between the adults. "Dad, Emily, look at this picture of a velociraptor. They were super intelligent and hunted in packs," Ethan said excitedly, showing a page from the book. "Amazing, champ," said Michael, ruffling his son's hair but exchanging a meaningful glance with Emily. The rest of the afternoon flew by, with Ethan absorbing every piece of information from the exhibit and Emily showing genuine patience and interest in every explanation the boy gave. Michael noticed how she had naturally become part of the family dynamic, not as an intruder, but as someone who fit perfectly. When they left the museum, it was almost 6 p.m., and Ethan was visibly tired but radiant. "This was the best day of my life," Ethan declared dramatically, making the adults laugh. "I'm glad you enjoyed it, dear," said Emily, bending down to hug him. "Emily, would you like to have dinner with us?" Dad makes the best spaghetti in the world, Ethan spontaneously invited. Michael felt his heart race at his son's unexpected invitation, but looked to Emily, hoping she would politely decline. "If your dad doesn't mind, I'd love to," Emily replied, looking at Michael expectantly. "Of course, it would be a pleasure," said Michael, surprising himself with his own response. At the apartment, Michael prepared his specialty, spaghetti carbonara, while Emily helped Ethan organize his new dinosaur photos in an album. The atmosphere was relaxed and natural, as if this routine had always existed. "Emily, do you have children?" Ethan suddenly asked while gluing a picture of a stegosaurus in the album. "No, Ethan, I don't have children," Emily replied. "Why not?" Ethan asked with the innocent curiosity of children. Emily looked at Michael, who was clearly paying attention to the conversation while stirring the sauce. "I've never found the right family to have children with," Emily answered honestly. "But would you like to have them?" Ethan continued probing. "You know, Ethan, I always thought I wouldn't. But lately I've been thinking maybe I would," Emily replied, her eyes briefly meeting Michael's. During dinner, the conversation flowed naturally. Ethan talked about school, his friends, and his plans for his next birthday. Emily shared funny stories from her childhood in Atlanta, and Michael spoke about his architectural projects, explaining to Ethan how buildings are constructed. "Emily, can you come to my birthday?" Ethan suddenly asked in the middle of the flan dessert that Michael had prepared. "When is your—" "What's your birthday, dear?" Emily asked. "Next month on the 15th. It's going to be at a pizzeria with arcade games. It's really cool," Ethan explained enthusiastically. "If your dad allows it, I would love to attend your birthday," Emily said, looking at Michael. "Of course, it would be great to have you there," Michael said sincerely. When it was time for Emily to leave, Ethan insisted on showing her his room, proudly displaying his collection of toy dinosaurs and his drawings taped to the wall. "You have a really cool room, Ethan," Emily praised, genuinely admiring the drawings. "I made this one at school when you came to talk about brushing teeth," Ethan said, pointing to a drawing where he had depicted a woman in a lab coat. "It's you." Emily felt her heart squeeze at the sight of the drawing. It was simple, made with crayons, but clearly created with love. "It's beautiful, Ethan. Can I take a picture of it?" she asked. "Sure, and if you want, you can take it home," Ethan generously offered. "Are you sure? It's a very special drawing," Emily asked. "I am. That way you can remember me when you're working," Ethan said with the simple logic of children. At the apartment door, during the farewell, Ethan hugged Emily tightly. "Thank you for the best day ever," he said. "Thank you, Ethan. It was one of the best days I've ever had," Emily replied sincerely. Michael accompanied Emily to the elevator, a comfortable atmosphere of intimacy between them. "Emily, thank you for today. Ethan hasn't stopped smiling since we left the museum," Michael said. "Thank you for letting me be part of this day," Emily replied. "Michael, can I say something?" "Of course," he responded. "You have a lovely family. Ethan is lucky to have a dad like you, and you are lucky to have a son like him," Emily said, her voice heavy with emotion. "Emily," Michael began but hesitated. "What is it?" she asked. "Nothing. Just thank you for understanding our family," Michael finally said. When Emily got home that night, she taped Ethan's drawing to the refrigerator and stared at it for a long time. For the first time in her adult life, she allowed herself to imagine what it would be like to be part of a family, what it would be like to have a child calling her mom, what it would be like to build a life alongside someone like Michael. Michael, in turn, put Ethan to bed and stood on the apartment balcony, looking at the city lights and thinking about how his life was changing. 7 years ago, when he took on the responsibility for Ethan, he had closed his heart to any romantic possibility, focusing solely on being the best dad he could be. But Emily was gently but persistently challenging that decision, showing that perhaps it was possible to expand his family without compromising Ethan's well-being. That night, all three went to bed with the feeling that something important had changed. That day at the museum had planted seeds of a possible family that none of them had planned, but that they all secretly began to desire. Life had taken on a pleasantly predictable rhythm in recent weeks. Emily was becoming a constant presence in Michael and Ethan's routine, not in an intrusive way, but naturally, as if she had always belonged in that family circle. She would come over for dinner on weekends, accompany Ethan to routine medical appointments, and even help with homework when Michael was overwhelmed with projects at the office. One Thursday morning, while Michael was preparing breakfast and Ethan was getting ready for school, Emily called with an unusual excitement in her voice. "Michael, are you free on Saturday? I got tickets for the aquarium. I thought Ethan would love to see real sharks," she said, clearly thrilled with the idea. "He's going to be over the moon." Michael laughed, imagining Ethan's reaction. "What time were you thinking?" "How about we meet at 10 a.m.? We can have lunch there and make a whole day of it," Emily suggested. "Perfect. Ethan," Michael called. "Come here, I have a surprise for you." Ethan came running, still brushing his teeth, toothpaste foaming at the corner of his mouth. "Emily got tickets for the aquarium on Saturday," Michael announced. Ethan nearly choked on his toothpaste from excitement. "Really? We're going to see real sharks?" he asked, practically bouncing in place. "That's right, champ," Michael confirmed, amused by his son's reaction. "Can I talk to her?" Ethan asked, reaching for the phone. Michael handed the cell to Ethan, who immediately began chattering about everything he knew about marine life, while Emily patiently listened on the other end of the line, asking questions that fueled the boy's enthusiasm even more. But that same afternoon, the harmony was broken by an unexpected call. Michael was at the office, reviewing the plans for a residential project in Brooklyn, when Sarah, his assistant, announced over the intercom, "Michael, there's a lady on the line saying she's from Ethan's family. She insists it's urgent." Michael felt his blood run cold. 7 years, no member of Ethan's biological family had reached out. "Transfer it to me," Michael said, bracing himself for what might come. "Hello, Mr. Johnson," said a mature female voice with a Midwestern accent. "Yes, this is he. Who am I speaking with?" Michael asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "My name is Lisa. I'm Ethan's aunt, his father's sister. I just found out about the accident and about Ethan," the woman said, her voice heavy with emotion. Michael felt as if the ground was opening beneath his feet. Ethan's paternal family had completely vanished after the accident, and Michael had assumed they simply didn't want to be involved in the situation. "Ms. Lisa, where have you been all these years?" Michael asked, a pang of anxiety rising in him, with anger creeping into her voice. "I lived abroad, Mr. Johnson. My husband had a job opportunity in Argentina, and we moved 8 years ago. I lost contact with David, and only now have I returned to the US and discovered everything," Aunt Lisa explained, her voice trembling. "And what exactly do you want?" Michael asked directly, all his protective instincts on high alert. "I want to meet my great-nephew. I want to know if he is okay, if he needs anything. I am the only family he has besides you," Aunt Lisa said. "Ethan has everything he needs," Michael replied firmly. "He has a stable, happy, secure life. Mr. Johnson, I don't intend to cause any trouble. I just would like to meet the boy. David always spoke of him with such affection in the few letters we exchanged before the accident." Aunt Lisa pleaded with a vulnerability that made Michael hesitate. "Aunt Lisa, Ethan doesn't know about your existence. To him, I am his father, and our family is complete this way," Michael explained. "I completely understand the situation, Mr. Johnson, and I admire what you've done for Ethan. But could we meet?" Just to talk? Aunt Lisa insisted. Michael was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. The last thing he wanted was to complicate Ethan's life, but the curiosity about where this woman had been all these years and what her true intentions were consumed him. "All right, we can meet on Monday at 2 p.m. at Central Perk on Fifth Avenue, but let me be clear that this does not mean you will have access to Ethan," Michael said firmly. "I completely understand. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. See you on Monday," Aunt Lisa said before hanging up. Michael sat at his desk for several minutes, trying to process what had just happened. After 7 years of stability, of building a perfect life for Ethan, someone from the past was now appearing who could complicate everything. His first reaction was to call Dr. Emily. "Emily, I need to talk to you. Can you meet us after I pick up Ethan from school?" Michael asked, barely waiting for her to answer. "Sure. Did something happen?" Dr. Emily asked, immediately sensing the tension in his voice. "Someone from Ethan's biological family has appeared. I need advice," Michael admitted. "I'll wait for you at Central Park near the playground. At 7 p.m., Dr. Emily suggested. "Perfect. Thank you," Michael said, relieved to have someone to share this situation with. When Michael arrived at the park with Ethan, Dr. Emily was already there, sitting on a bench watching other kids play. Ethan ran to her immediately, as had become his custom. "Emily, guess what? Tomorrow we're going to the aquarium," Ethan shouted, throwing himself into her arms. "I know. I can't wait to see your reaction to the sharks," Dr. Emily replied, hugging him affectionately. "Ethan, go play on the slide for a bit. I need to talk to Emily about work," Michael said, discreetly signaling to Dr. Emily that it was something serious. "Okay, Dad, but don't take too long," Ethan said, running toward the playground. Michael sat next to Dr. Emily, clearly tense. "What happened?" Dr. Emily asked directly. Michael told her about Aunt Lisa's call, her disappearance for 8 years, and her sudden interest in meeting Ethan. Dr. Emily listened in. Silence, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "And do you intend to introduce her to Ethan?" Dr. Emily asked when Michael finished recounting. "I don't know. My entire life for the last 7 years has been built around providing stability for Ethan. The last thing I want is to introduce elements that could disrupt that stability," Michael explained. "But what if she is genuinely interested in Ethan's well-being? What if she could add something positive to his life?" Dr. Emily gently questioned. "And what if the opposite is true? What if she wants to challenge custody? What if she decides that Ethan should be with his biological family?" Michael voiced his deepest fears. Dr. Emily watched Ethan playing on the slide, laughing and interacting with other kids. "Michael, look at him. Ethan is clearly a happy, secure, well-adjusted child." "Any sensible person would see that immediately," Dr. Emily said. "You've built something beautiful with him." "But what if she isn't sensible? What if she is one of those people who believe that blood is more important than love?" Michael insisted on his concerns. "Then you fight, and you don't fight alone," Dr. Emily said, taking his hand. "I'm here. Ethan has a support network now. School, friends, me. You're not alone in this anymore." Michael felt a huge relief upon hearing those words. For so long he had carried the entire weight of responsibility for Ethan alone that he had forgotten what it was like to have someone share that burden. "Emily, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me," Michael said, looking directly into her eyes. "Of course," Dr. Emily replied. "If things get complicated, if there are legal issues, custody questions, anything that could affect Ethan, will you still be here? Or will you step back to avoid getting involved in complications?" Michael asked, with a vulnerability that touched her deeply. Dr. Emily didn't hesitate for a second. "Michael, Ethan is not just a child I treat medically, and you are not just the father of a patient. You have become my family too," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "I'm not going anywhere." Michael felt tears welling up in his eyes. It had been years since he allowed himself to be vulnerable with another adult, but Dr. Emily had created a safe space where he could express his fears and insecurities. "Thank you," he simply said, squeezing her hand. Ethan came running back to them, interrupting the intimate moment. "Dad, Emily, did you see? I went down the slide head first," he announced proudly. "Very brave," Dr. Emily praised, "but promise me you'll be careful not to get hurt." "I promise. Did you finish talking about work?" Ethan asked. "Yes, we did, son. How about we go home for dinner?" Michael suggested. "Can I invite Emily to—" "Are we having dinner too?" Ethan asked hopefully. Michael looked at Emily, who nodded with a smile. "Of course, champ. We're all going." "Home," Michael agreed. During dinner, Michael watched Emily interacting with Ethan, helping him cut his meat, listening to his school stories, laughing at his childish jokes, and realized that she had become much more than just a doctor who occasionally visited them. She had become a maternal figure in Ethan's life, and a companion for him as well. After Ethan went to bed, Michael and Emily stayed in the living room, discussing the situation with Miss Smith and planning strategies to handle different possible scenarios. "Michael, can I suggest something?" Emily said during a pause in the conversation. "Sure," Michael replied. "When you meet with Miss Smith on Monday, how about I go with you? As Ethan's doctor, I have legitimacy to be present in discussions about his well-being," Emily suggested. Michael considered the proposal. Having Emily present would lend more medical credibility to Ethan's situation, and it would also mean he wouldn't face Ms. Smith alone. "Would you do that?" Michael asked. "Of course I would. We're in this together," Emily replied without hesitation. "Then it's settled. Monday at 2 p.m., just the two of us," Michael agreed. That night after Emily left, Michael stayed awake for hours thinking about how drastically his life had changed in just a few months. What started as a simple medical appointment had evolved into something he had never planned for, but now couldn't imagine living without. And for the first time since taking responsibility for Ethan, Michael felt ready to face any challenge that came his way, because now he was no longer alone. He had Emily by his side, and together they would protect Ethan from anything that could threaten the family they had built with so much love and care. Saturday at the aquarium would be a last moment of peace before the storm that was approaching with Ms. Smith's arrival in their lives. But Michael was determined to enjoy every happy moment with Ethan and Emily, knowing that these moments were precious and worth fighting for. Saturday at the New York Aquarium was magical, just as Michael had hoped. Ethan was fascinated by the sharks, spent almost an hour watching the jellyfish in their illuminated tanks, and insisted on taking dozens of photos with Emily in front of the glass tunnel where the fish swam overhead. To outside observers, they looked like a normal family enjoying a weekend together, dad, mom, and son, exploring the wonders of the aquatic world. But the tranquility of the moment was constantly interrupted by Michael's thoughts about the meeting awaiting him on Monday. Even while trying to focus on Ethan's joy, he couldn't stop speculating about Miss Smith's true intentions and how she might affect his carefully constructed family. Emily, noticing the underlying tension in Michael despite his efforts to disguise it, made it a point to create especially memorable moments for Ethan during the outing. She bought him a book about marine life at the gift shop, taught him about different species of fish they encountered, and even convinced an aquarium staff member to let Ethan touch a starfish in the interactive area. "This is the best day of my life," Ethan declared dramatically during lunch at the aquarium's restaurant, his favorite phrase to express extreme happiness. "The best so far," Emily corrected with a smile. "I'm sure we'll have many even better days ahead." Michael watched the exchange between Emily and Ethan, noticing how naturally she included herself in the family's future plans. There was something comforting in the way she spoke about their future as an established fact, not as an uncertain possibility. On Monday, Michael woke up with a knot in his stomach that he couldn't dissipate even with his extra strong morning coffee. Ethan noticed the tension during breakfast, but Michael managed to disguise it by saying he had an important meeting at work. "Dad, do you get nervous at important meetings?" Ethan asked, chewing his toast with jelly while watching Michael absent-mindedly stir his coffee. "Sometimes, son. When things are very important, it's normal to feel a little nervous," Michael explained, surprised by the boy's perception. "Emily said that when she gets nervous, she takes 3 deep breaths and thinks of good things. It works," Ethan innocently shared. Michael smiled despite the anxiety. Emily was clearly leaving positive marks on Ethan's life in ways he didn't always notice. At 1:45 p.m., Michael and Emily met in front of Central Perk. Emily was dressed professionally. Navy blazer, black dress pants, hair neatly tied in an elegant bun, her appearance conveying medical authority and professional credibility. "How are you feeling?" Emily asked, noticing the evident tension on Michael's face. "Like I'm about to enter a battle," Michael admitted. "Thank you for being here." "Always," Emily replied simply, taking his hand for a moment before they entered the cafe. Miss Smith was easy to identify. A woman in her mid-50s, neatly styled grey hair, conservative but quality clothing, sitting alone at a corner table with a nervous expression on her face. When she saw Michael approaching, she immediately stood up. "Mr. Johnson?" she asked, extending her hand. "Miss Smith, this is Dr. Emily Carter, Ethan's pediatrician," Michael introduced, watching her reaction to Emily's presence closely. "Dr. Emily Carter, nice to meet you. It's wonderful to know that Ethan has quality medical care," Miss Smith said, shaking Emily's hand with a smile that seemed genuine. They sat at the table, and for a moment there was an awkward silence as each assessed the others. "Miss Smith, I'll be direct," Michael began. "Where have you been for the past 7 years?" "One of the most difficult times in Ethan's life?" Miss Smith sighed deeply, clearly prepared for that question. "In New Jersey. My husband was transferred to the company's branch there. We moved quickly, and I lost touch with family back in Brazil," she explained. "David and I weren't very close, so when we stopped corresponding, I thought it was natural." "And how did you find out about the accident now?" asked Dr. Emily, her voice professional but not hostile. "We returned to the US 3 months ago. My husband retired, and we decided to come back. I went to visit some relatives in New Jersey and heard about the accident through a cousin. It was a terrible shock," said Miss Smith, her eyes filling with tears. Mike observed her emotion, trying to determine if it was genuine or performative. "And what exactly do you want from Ethan?" Mike asked directly. "Mr. Johnson, I know you must be concerned about my intentions, but I can assure you that I didn't come here to cause problems," said Miss Smith, leaning forward. I just want to meet my great-nephew, to see if he is well, if he needs anything." "Ethan is doing very well, Miss Smith," intervened Dr. Emily. "As his doctor, I can attest that he is an exceptionally healthy, happy and well-adjusted child." "And educationally, socially?" asked Miss Smith. "Ethan is in 2nd grade with excellent grades. He has many friends, plays soccer at the club, and has healthy hobbies like drawing and reading about dinosaurs," Mike listed. "He has a complete and stable life." Miss Smith nodded, seeming satisfied with the information. "And financially? Can you provide everything he needs?" she asked, and Mike immediately tensed. "Ethan lacks nothing. I have a successful architecture firm, my own apartment, health insurance, and savings for his college," Mike replied defensively. "I didn't mean to offend, Mr. Johnson. It's just, I have resources too. My husband had a successful international career. If Ethan needed any additional support for education, educational trips, anything," offered Miss Smith. Dr. Emily exchanged a quick glance with Mike. There was something in the way Miss Smith spoke about financial resources that sounded calculated. "Miss Smith, may I ask if you have other children?" Dr. Emily suddenly inquired. The question seemed to catch Miss Smith off guard. "No, doctor. I was never able to have children. It's part of the reason why Ethan is so important to me," she admitted, her voice becoming more emotional. "I understand," said Dr. Emily, making mental notes about the family dynamics. "Mr. Johnson," Miss Smith turned to him, "I would like to propose something. How about I get to know Ethan gradually, maybe starting as a family friend? I don't need to identify as a great aunt right away." Mike hesitated, clearly conflicted. "And what would be the ultimate goal of this approach?" he asked. "Honestly, I would like Ethan to know that he has more family besides you, that he has someone who cares about him, who can help if needed," explained Miss Smith. "Miss Smith, Ethan has a family," Dr. Emily said firmly. "He has Mike, who is an exceptional father, and a solid support network that includes school, friends, and health professionals who look after him." Of course," Miss Smith said quickly. "I don't intend to question that. I just want to be part of that network too." Mike was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. If I agreed to this, it would be under very specific conditions," Mike finally said. "What conditions?" asked Ms. Smith. "First, you do not identify as family to Ethan until I decide it is appropriate, if it ever is," Mike began. "Second, any meeting happens in my presence or in the presence of Dr. Emily. Third, if at any point I perceive that your presence is negatively affecting Ethan, the contact stops immediately." "I completely understand. I accept all the conditions," Miss Smith quickly agreed. "And the fourth condition," Dr. Emily added, "any matters related to Ethan's medical care, education, or well-being remain the sole decision of Mike as the legal father." "Absolutely, I do not intend to interfere with parental decisions," Ms. Smith agreed. "So, maybe we can try," Mike said hesitantly, "but slowly, and only if Ethan feels comfortable." "Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I promise you won't regret it," said Miss Smith, visible emotion in her voice. As they left the cafe, Mike and Dr. Emily walked, in silence, to the car. "What did you think?" Mike asked when they were alone. "Honestly, I'm torn," admitted Dr. Emily. "She seems genuinely interested in Ethan, but there is something I can't fully identify." I felt the same way. The way she talked about financial resources, about helping Ethan, it sounded like she had specific plans, Mike said. "Let's take it slow, as you said, and stay alert for any signs that she has motivations beyond simply wanting to meet Ethan," suggested Dr. Emily. "Emily," Mike turned to her before getting into the car, "thank you for being here today. I don't know if I could have handled this alone." "Mike, how many times do I need to say it? You are not alone in this anymore," Dr. Emily replied, gently touching his arm. That night, when Mike told Ethan that he had met a friend who would like to meet him, the boy reacted with the natural curiosity of children, but without special interest. For Ethan, his life was already complete with Mike and Dr. Emily, and a new person was just another adult in the world. But Mike knew that the situation was far from resolved. Miss Smith had agreed to his conditions very easily, and there was something about her insistence on financial resources that bothered him. As an architect, he had learned to identify structural problems before they became evident, and his intuition told him that there were cracks in Ms. Smith's story that could become bigger issues in the future. The family that he, Ethan, and Dr. Emily had built together was about to be tested in ways none of them could foresee. But Mike was determined to protect Ethan's happiness at all costs, even if it meant facing battles he would prefer to avoid. 2 weeks later. Time had passed since the meeting with Sarah, and she had respected the initial agreement of gradual contact. They had met 3 times, always in public places, always with Mike or Emily present, always maintaining her identity as a family friend. Ethan had been polite, but not particularly interested in her, treating her like any new adult, with childlike cordiality, but without forming special bonds. On a Thursday afternoon, Mike was at the office when he received a call that would change everything. It was Dr. James Smith, the neurologist responsible for David's treatment at the clinic. "Mike, I need to talk to you about David. Can you come here this afternoon? It's important," the doctor said, his voice heavy with seriousness. "Is something serious happening?" Mike asked, immediately concerned. "I prefer to explain in person." "How about 4 p.m.?" Dr. James suggested. Mike cancelled his afternoon appointments and headed to the clinic with his heart racing. During the journey, he called Emily. "Emily, David's doctor wants to speak with me urgently. Can you meet me at the clinic?" Mike asked, his voice tense. "Of course, I'm leaving the hospital right now," Emily replied immediately. "Everything will be fine, Mike." At the clinic, Dr. James welcomed them into his office with a serious but not necessarily grim expression. David was not present, which heightened Mike's anxiety. "Mike, Emily, thank you for coming. I have news about David that is complicated." Dr. James began, consulting charts on his desk. "Has he gotten worse?" Mike asked directly. "Actually, it's the opposite. David has shown significant neurological progress in recent months. His clarity has increased, his motor coordination has improved, and he has expressed interest in taking on certain responsibilities," Dr. James explained. Mike felt as if the ground was shifting beneath his feet. "What kind of responsibilities?" Emily asked, discreetly holding Mike's hand. "David has been asking about Ethan, frequently, and he has expressed a desire to have a more active role in his son's life," Dr. James said delicately. "But is he fit to take on fatherhood?" Mike asked, his voice rising higher than he intended. "That's the complex question," Dr. James admitted. "Neurologically, David still has significant limitations. He needs specialized care, supervision for daily activities, controlled medication, but mentally he is more present than he has been in years." Emily and Mike exchanged a look filled with concern. "Dr. James, what does this mean practically?" Emily asked with her medical objectivity. "It means that David has the legal right to question the current custody arrangements if he wishes, and it means that you need to decide how to handle this situation before it becomes legally complicated," Dr. James explained. "Can I talk to David?" Mike asked. "Of course. He's waiting for you," Dr. James said, standing up. In David's room, the change was visible. He was sitting in a chair, dressed in regular clothes instead of hospital attire, his hair combed, his posture more upright. When Mike entered, David stood up, something he hadn't been able to do firmly in years. "Mike! Emily!" David greeted, his smile brighter and more aware than Mike remembered. "David, you look great," Mike said, genuinely surprised by the improvement. "I feel more like myself than I have in years," David confirmed, gesturing for them to sit down. "And this has brought me a clarity that I need to share with you." Mike braced himself for what was to come. "Mike, I know exactly what you have done for Ethan all these years. I know you raised him as your own son, that you built a beautiful life for him, that you sacrificed to give him everything I couldn't," David began, his voice clear and emotional. "David," Mike started, but David gently interrupted him. "Let me finish, brother. I need to say this," David insisted. "You gave Ethan something more valuable than DNA. You gave unconditional love, stability, security. You are his father in every way that matters." Mike felt tears welling up in his eyes. "But," David continued, "now that I'm better, I want to have some role in my son's life. Not as a father. That place is yours forever, but as Uncle David, who loves him very much." Emily observed the dynamic between the brothers, seeing the genuine love and emotional complexity of the situation. "David, what exactly are you proposing?" Mike asked. "I want to meet Ethan. I want him to know that I exist, that I love him, that I am proud of the amazing man you are helping him become," David said. "But I want to do this the right way, respecting the life you have built. Ethan doesn't know about our family situation," Mike admitted. "I know, and I understand why you didn't tell him, but maybe it's time to tell the truth in a way that is appropriate for his age," David suggested. Emily leaned forward. "David, how do you imagine this revelation would affect Ethan?" she asked with her medical perspective. "Dr. Emily, Ethan is an intelligent and loved child. If the truth is told with love, surrounded by security, I believe he will be able to understand," David replied. "And if you are there to support him, he will be okay." Mike remained silent for a long moment, clearly struggling with conflicting emotions. "David, I need time to process this, and I need to think about what is best for Ethan," Mike finally said. "Of course, brother. I'm in no rush. Ethan has had 7 years with you. I can wait as long as necessary for you to feel comfortable," David said with a patience that demonstrated his true mental improvement. As they left the clinic, Mike and Emily headed to the park where they used to discuss important issues, the same place where they had talked about the situation with Sarah weeks earlier. "How are you feeling?" Emily asked, watching Mike process everything that had happened. "Confused, relieved, scared, all at once," Mike admitted. "David is really better, and it's wonderful, but you're afraid of how these changes will affect Ethan," Emily completed. "Exactly. Ethan has a perfect life right now. He is happy, safe, stable. What if telling the truth messes all that up?" Michael voiced his fears. "Michael, look at me," Emily said, taking his hands. "Ethan is a resilient child because you raised him with love and security. That solid foundation won't disappear just because he learns more details about his family. But what if he gets confused about who his real dad is?" Michael asked, his greatest insecurity finally coming to the surface. "Michael, fatherhood isn't about genetics. It's about waking up in the middle of the night when the child has nightmares. It's about helping with homework, teaching how to ride a bike, being present for every important moment," Emily said firmly. "You are Ethan's dad. David may be his biological father, but you are the one who raised him." Michael absorbed her words, feeling slightly more at ease. "And there's one more thing," Emily continued. "Ethan won't face this alone. He will have you, he will have David, and he will have me." "Emily," Michael began. "Michael, I need to say something I've been feeling for weeks," Emily interrupted him. "I love you both. I love Ethan as if he were my son, and I love you. I love you in a way I never thought was possible." The words came out with an intensity that surprised them both. Michael watched her, seeing the vulnerability and sincerity in her eyes. "Emily, I also—" Michael started, but was interrupted by his phone ringing. It was Ethan calling from school. "Dad, Ms. Smith said I could call you. I forgot my backpack at home and need my books for homework," Ethan said, with the typical concern of a responsible child. "Calm down, buddy. Dad will grab your backpack and bring it to school now," Michael reassured him. "Thanks, Dad. You're the best dad in the world," Ethan said before hanging up. Michael looked at Emily, Ethan's words echoing between them. "Did you hear that?" Michael asked. "I did. And it's true," Emily confirmed. "Ethan knows who his dad is. The truth about David won't change that." That night, after picking up Ethan's backpack from school and helping him with his homework, Michael made a decision. He would talk to Ethan about David, but he would do it the right way, surrounded by love and security. "Ethan, Dad needs to talk to you about something important," Michael said while tucking Ethan in for bed. "Is it about work?" Ethan asked, putting on his Spider-Man pajamas. "It's about family," Michael said, sitting on the bed next to his son. What kind of thing about family? Ethan asked, his curiosity piqued. Buddy, you know that Dad loves you very much, right? Michael began. I do, and I love you very much too, Ethan replied promptly. Great, that's the most important thing in the world, Michael said. But there's a special person that Dad would like you to meet. Someone who loves you very much too. Who? Ethan asked. My brother David, your Uncle David. He is your heart dad, but I am your real dad, the one who takes care of you every day, Michael explained carefully. Ethan furrowed his brow, processing the information with the seriousness he applied to solving complex puzzles. So, I have two dads? Ethan finally asked. You have an Uncle David who brought you into the world and loves you very much, and a dad, Michael, who takes care of you and loves you very much too, Michael explained. Like Emily? Ethan asked suddenly. What do you mean, buddy? Michael asked, surprised. Emily loves me like she's my mum, but she's my special Emily, Ethan explained with the simple wisdom of children. Uncle David loves me like a dad, but you are my special dad who takes care of me. Michael felt his heart swell with pride at Ethan's emotional maturity. Exactly, champ, that's exactly it, Michael confirmed. Can I meet Uncle David? Ethan asked. Would you like to meet him? Michael asked. Yes, anyone who loves me must be nice, Ethan said with the undeniable logic of childhood. 3 days later, Michael arranged the meeting between Ethan and David at the clinic, with Emily present for emotional support. When Ethan saw David, his first reaction was to run and hide behind Michael's legs, more out of shyness than fear. Hi, Ethan, David said kindly, crouching down to the child's level. I'm David. Your dad Michael told me many cool things about you. Ethan peeked out from behind, Michael watching David with curiosity. You look like Dad, Ethan observed. That's because we are brothers, David explained with a smile. Do you like dinosaurs? Ethan asked, slowly coming out from behind Michael. I love dinosaurs. What's your favorite? David responded enthusiastically. And so, naturally, Ethan began to tell David all about dinosaurs, about school, about his friends, about Emily. David listened with complete attention, asking interested questions and laughing at Ethan's childlike jokes. Michael watched the interaction, seeing how David connected with Ethan without trying to force a paternal role, completely respecting the established dynamic. Uncle David, can you come to my birthday? Ethan asked after an hour of conversation. If your dad allows, I would love to, David replied, looking at Michael. Of course you can, Michael agreed. A month later, at Ethan's 8th birthday at a pizzeria with arcade games, the whole unconventional family was gathered. Michael as Dad, Emily as the special Emily, a role Ethan had created for her and that everyone had embraced. David as the loving uncle, and even Sarah, whom Ethan had accepted as a family friend without questioning her origins. During the party, while Ethan played with his school friends, Michael, Emily and David talked about how everything had resolved itself naturally. You know what's most amazing about all this? David said. Ethan was winning a game of children's basketball. Ethan never questioned whether there was enough room in his life for more people who love him. He simply opened his heart to all of us. It's the wisdom of children, Emily agreed. They intuitively understand that love is not a finite quantity. The more love you share, the more love there is. Michael watched his family, Ethan radiant on his birthday, surrounded by friends and adults who loved him unconditionally. David smiling more than he had in years, Emily naturally organizing the party details as if she had always been part of the family, and even Sarah respectfully participating in the celebrations. Emily, Michael turned to her during a pause in the party. Do you remember that conversation in the park weeks ago, when you said you loved me? I remember, Emily replied, blushing. I didn't get a chance to respond fully. Michael said, I love you too, and Ethan loves you, and I would like to know if you would like to make this official. Emily looked at him confused. Official how? She asked. Michael knelt right there in the middle of the noisy pizzeria, pulling a small ring from his pocket. Emily Carter, will you marry me and officially become Ethan's mom? Michael asked, his voice trembling with emotion. The entire pizzeria stopped to watch the scene. Ethan dropped the game and ran to them. David approached with tears in his eyes, and even Sarah smiled with emotion. Yes! Emily shouted, throwing herself into Michael's arms. Is Emily going to be my real mom? Ethan asked excitedly. If you want her to be, champ, Michael replied. I want to, Ethan shouted, jumping into the collective embrace that formed. David stepped closer, placing his hands on Michael and Emily's shoulders. Mike, Emily, thank you for showing that family is built with love, not just blood, David said emotionally. Thank you for understanding that love has no limits or labels, Michael replied. 6 months later, Michael and Emily got married in a simple yet emotional ceremony in the same park where they had had so many important conversations. Ethan was the ring bearer, wearing a tiny suit identical to Michael's, carrying the rings with the seriousness of someone on an important mission. David, now in advanced rehabilitation but still living at the clinic, was Michael's best man. During the ceremony, he gave a speech that left no eye dry. Today, we are not just celebrating the marriage of Michael and Emily. We are celebrating the official formation of a family that has existed in all our hearts for months. Ethan, you gained a wonderful mom. Emily, you gained an amazing son and a husband who is the best man I know. Michael, you gained a partner who understands that family is about presence, not perfection. And we all gained proof that true love always finds a way to overcome any obstacle. During the reception, while watching Ethan dance with Emily, she had insisted on having a special dance with her son. Michael reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. What had started as a desperate morning in the hospital with a feverish child had transformed into a beautiful and complex family, built on the solid foundation of unconditional love. Ethan now had not only a dad who adored him, but also a mum who chose to love him, a biological uncle who respected the choices made in his name, and even a great aunt who had found her place in the family without disturbing the existing harmony. Michael, Emily approached after her dance with Ethan. Thank you for letting me be part of your family. Emily, Michael pulled her close. Thank you for showing that our family wasn't complete until you arrived. Ethan ran to them, interrupting the romantic moment with the typical energy of an 8-year-old. Mom, Emily, Dad, Michael, can I say something? Ethan said, using for the first time the title Mom that he had chosen for Emily. Of course. Son, Emily said, her heart filling with joy at hearing Ethan call her Mom. I think we are the coolest family in the world, declared Ethan, because we chose to love each other. And in that moment, with Ethan in his arms, David smiling beside them, and the whole family gathered in a celebration of love that had overcome all obstacles, Michael knew that his son was right. They were indeed the coolest family in the world, not despite their complications, but because of them. Because they had discovered that true love does not follow conventional rules, is not limited to traditional definitions, and always finds a way to create beauty from imperfect circumstances.